Amen. Once you make your way to your seat, and turn with me to 2 Samuel chapter 20. 2 Samuel chapter 20. We're just about finished with 2 Samuel, and we'll take a break for the rest of the year. And first of the year, we'll start back up on Wednesday nights and get into 1 Kings. 2 Samuel chapter 20. You follow along as I read out loud. There happened to be there a rebel whose name was Sheba, the son of Bichri, a Benjamite. And he blew a trumpet and said, "We have no share in David, nor do we have inheritance in the son of Jesse. Every man to his tent, O Israel." So every man of Israel deserted David and followed Sheba, the son of Bichri, but the men of Judah from the Jordan as far as Jerusalem remained loyal to their king. Now remember last week, we saw this big, the battle and Absalom, David's son, gets killed. His hair gets hung in one of these trees, and so Joab thrust him through with 3 spears, and then a bunch of guys get around him and beat him to death. Oh, what a terrible thing. And so then they have to take news back to King David about his son's death. And so they send the runners and all of this, and Joab had to kind of get onto David, you're just kind of moping around the palace, and all the people are thinking you'd rather them have died than your son, who was your enemy. Being killed. You need to straighten up or you're going to lose the whole nation. And so David kind of, gets his public relations in order and starts meeting people at the gate, and everything looks like it's going well until we get into chapter 20. It's like he can't catch his breath. You ever felt that way? I mean, you almost get up and you get knocked back down, and you almost get up and you get knocked back down. I think some of the most comforting, enjoyable things in heaven are going to be getting to meet up with people that inspired us and encouraged us through our little journey. Can you imagine getting to pull David aside or Ruth or someone like this and saying, I just want to tell you how much your life, I know it was terrible for you living it, but your life really helped me in my struggles and everything. And they're probably going to say, well, man, sit down and tell me your story. What was it like in the year 2000, You just never know. So David, it's like he dealt with one little situation, and now what happens? He's got a rebel named Sheba that spouts off, and every man of Israel deserts David. You've got civil war breaking out, led by this fella by the name of Sheba. And the Bible is very blatantly clear what this guy is. He is a rebel. And you know what that means in Hebrew? It means he's a rebel. No key, secret meaning to the word here. A rebel then is still a rebel today. And I'll tell you something now. I've been in the ministry a long time. And I've had a lot of years really trying to reach out to rebels. Can you say that's true, Tam? I've reached out to a lot of rebels over the years. I think we all have a little bit of rebel in us. I think that's really individualism. I don't know that I'd call that true, rebellion, right? But here's what I've discovered in years of trying to reach rebels. They tell you all these excuses why they don't like organized religion, organized church, denominational church, whatever. And you deal with every one of their biases and problems and issues and everything else. You remove all of that, and you know what? They still don't show. They still don't plug in. They still don't connect. You know why? Can't reach a rebel. That's just not 20 years of experience talking. That's what God's Word says. I wish I'd started out being a verse-by-verse Bible teacher in those early days. It would have saved me a lot of heartache. Because year after year, I tried to reach out to rebels, and there's no reaching them. We ought to reach the reachable. Isn't that right? Reach the reachable. I mean, the energy that you could spend trying to get disgruntled rebels to come back to a church that left over some petty thing. Tammy was telling me about some church that sent out a postcard saying, "I'm sorry." I mean, anytime the church has let you down or something like that, a card that says, "I'm sorry." And I joked with her I wouldn't do this, but I'd like to send out a card that says, "I'm not." You need to grow up. Everybody's got problems. We're all jerks once in a while, right? I'm being one right now. I mean, we're just human, right? You forgive your spouse, you forgive your children, you forgive your parents, you forgive your coworkers. Everybody can give grace to everybody but the local church, right? We got all these rebels out there talking about how the church let them down and blah. Done with them, right? Now, we all have a little bit of this rebel thing in us, but that's not the same thing that we're reading here, is it? This is a guy who's trying to take the throne from God's anointed. That's the phrase that we see all through 1 and 2 Samuel referring to the king of Israel. God's anointed. In other words, this is the guy that God picked. When God picks somebody for something, you may not like it, but you got to go with it because that's God's pick. If you're having some relational stuff with your spouse, when you entered into a covenant marriage relationship with your spouse, you know what that means? That means the moment you said "I do," that God picked him or her for you. That's God's anointed for you. So you might as well learn to love him. Yes, right? That's what Tammy's doing. She's learning to love me after 27 years. So let's see what this Sheba guy is going to do next. So now David came to his house at Jerusalem, verse 3, and the king took the 10 women, his concubines, who he had left to keep the house, and put them in seclusion and supported them, but did not go into them. That means that he didn't have any physical intimacy with them after his son Absalom had done what he had done. So they were shut up to the day of their death, living in widowhood. Now, women just were treated terribly all throughout history. Wouldn't you agree with that? I mean, even today, women are treated terribly. But what it means when it says that he put them in seclusion and supported them, actually seclusion was a means to protect them from humiliation. And support means food, shelter, and clothing, the share that you would get as one of the king's wives and all of this. And you and I we don't see the value of that, 2,000 or 3,000 years ago, and in most places of the world, women will marry a guy simply because he'll be a good provider. Because most of the world is starving to death. They don't know where their next meal's coming from, you see. And so that he provided for them food, shelter, and clothing. David is seeking to care for these women that had been violated by his own son. Isn't that just a terrible thing? And the king said to Amasa, and remember, Amasa's the guy that was Absalom's captain, and he kind of demoted Joab from being captain of his army and gave Amasa this job, trying to get the people of Judah to come back to him, right? So the king said to Amasa, "Assemble the men of Judah for me within 3 days, and be present here yourself." So Amasa went to assemble the men of Judah, but he delayed longer than the set time which David had appointed him. David said, "I need you to come back here with all the men," and he didn't show. He didn't show up. And David said to Abishai, that's Joab's little brother, remember? "Now Sheba the son of Bichri will do us more harm than Absalom. So take your Lord's servants and pursue him, lest he find for himself fortified cities and escape us." So Joab's men with the Cherethites, the Pelethites, and all the mighty men went out after him. And they went out of Jerusalem to pursue Sheba, the son of Bichri. So Amasa is ordered to handle this rebel Sheba because for some unexplained reason, Amasa just can't get the job done. So David puts Abishai on the case, and his brother Joab goes along. And you'll see why in just a moment. Verse 8, when they were at the large stone which is at Gibeon, Amasa came before them. Now Joab was dressed in battle armor, and on it was a belt with a sword fastened in its sheath at his hips. And as he was going forward, it fell out. Well, then Joab said to Amasa, "Are you in health, my brother?" Really they called everyone in their family brother, and this is his cousin. "Are you in health, my brother?" And Joab took Amasa by the beard with his right hand to kiss him. I mean, can you just picture that? I mean, they didn't have little girly beards like I've got. They had the real man beard, Duck Dynasty deal down to here. And so he reached out and grabbed his beard to pull him in to kiss him on the cheek, right? But Amasa did not notice the sword that was in Joab's hand. And he struck him with it in the stomach, and his entrails poured out on the ground. And he didn't strike him again. I mean, one time was enough. Thus he died. And then Joab and Abishai, his brother, pursued Sheba, the son of Bichri. So Joab has just put himself back in charge of the armies of Israel, hasn't he? He's taken this position of leadership back. He kills his cousin, and he heads out towards Sheba, heads out to get this guy named Sheba. Whew, that's ruthless, isn't it? I mean, think about it. This is his cousin. Do any of you have a cousin that you could kill? I don't have one cousin that I think I could kill, right? Now, let me read on. Verse 11, meanwhile, one of Joab's men stood near Amasa and said, "Whoever favors Joab and whoever's for David, follow Joab." So he kind of lumped the two together. But Amasa wallowed in his blood in the middle of the highway. And when the man saw that all the people stood still, he moved Amasa from the highway to the field and threw a garment over him when he saw that everyone who came upon him halted. I mean, so that it's just like today when there's a traffic accident, everyone, gets backed up. Everyone wants to stop and see what happened, right? So it's like, we got to get this guy off the road or no one's going to follow. And when he was removed from the highway, all the people went on after Joab to pursue Sheba, the son of Bichri. And he went through all the tribes of Israel to Abel and Beth Maacah and all the Berites. So they were gathered together and also went after Sheba. And then they came and besieged him in Abel of Beth Maacah, and they cast up a siege mound against the city, and it stood by the rampart. And all the people who were with Joab battered the wall to throw it down. So the whole idea of besieging a town was, they wouldn't allow any supplies in, no water into and they just kind of wait you out, just wait. And some you see when we get to 2 Kings that when the Babylonians made a siege around Jerusalem, the people were cannibalizing, eating their children, and just horrible stuff, right? So that's what's about to happen to this town in Israel by the captain of Israel. Why? Because he's after this rebel Sheba. You got to deal harshly with rebels sometimes, right? Verse 16, then a wise woman. I don't know why I always picture this lady as older, but because it doesn't say that she is. It just says she's a wise woman. Isn't that something? Then a wise woman cried out from the city, "Here, here! Please say to Joab, 'Come nearby that I may speak with you.' And when he had come near to her, the woman said, 'Are you Joab?' And he answered, 'I am.' And then she said to him, 'Well, hear the words of your maidservant.' And he answered, I'm listening." So she spoke, saying, "They used to talk in former times, saying, 'They shall surely seek guidance at Abel, and so they would end disputes.'" I mean, this is a place where people came to get things settled. A lot of wise people in this town. This town doesn't need to be destroyed. I mean, a lot of really sharp, bright, Israelites are here. "And I am among the peaceable and faithful in Israel. You seek to destroy a city and a mother in Israel." I mean, do you really want to kill a mom? That's a smart lady, isn't it? It appeals to, I mean, no matter, the toughest warrior had a mom that rocked him once, isn't that right? And he's thinking, wait a minute, yeah, that's like my own mother's behind that wall calling out to me. She says, would you destroy a city and a mother in Israel? Why would you swallow up the inheritance of the Lord? And Joab answered and said, far be it from me that I should swallow up or destroy. I mean, I don't want to do that. But, the king's given me these orders. I've got to get this guy. We can't let this guy get away. If he gets away, he's just going to cause trouble somewhere else, right? I mean, they're on a manhunt. That is not so, verse 21, but a man from the mountains of Ephraim, Sheba, the son of Bichri by name, has raised his hand against the king, against David. Deliver him only, and I'll depart from the city. So the woman said to Joab, this is a tough broad right here, if you don't mind me saying it that way, right? So the woman said to Joab, watch. And I wonder if her voice got a little low at this point. Watch. His head will be thrown to you over the wall, right? Probably not. It was probably still a sweet little voice. That's even more creepy. Watch. We'll throw his head over the wall in just a second. Hang on. That's pretty rough, isn't it? I mean, will you give us a few minutes? We're going to cut this guy's head off. We'll throw it over to you. You guys can play volleyball with it for all we, right? Verse 22, then the woman in her wisdom went to all the people. And they cut off the head of Sheba, the son of Bichri, and threw it out to Joab. So if you're a rebel, beware. This is what happens. Your head becomes a volleyball. Then he blew a trumpet, and they withdrew from the city, every man to his tent. So Joab returned to the king at Jerusalem. It says, and Joab was over all the army of Israel. What a surprise. Right? Listen, he got the job done. He got the job done. I mean, listen, if you want a promotion, if you want to move up in your career, in your occupation, whatever, be the person that gets the job done. Right? Some people don't work when it's time to work. They take breaks longer than they're supposed to take. Why? Because all their coworkers take breaks longer than they're supposed to take. Hey, you and me, we're working for the Lord, right? Now, the Lord's gracious to us. He's not nearly as mean as any earthly employer would ever be. But he wants us to work, right? So when all of your friends are taking extended breaks, working, not given a day's work for the wages that they're getting, you be the one that goes to work early and stays a little bit late and doesn't take a long break. You be the person that gets the job done. And I guarantee you, in any economy, in any situation, you'll be the one that gets promoted. You really will. I mean, do you believe this statement, if somebody wants a job, they can find a job? Yeah? Yeah, I do too. I really do. I believe if you really want a job, you can find a job. And I believe if you want to move up, this is still the country where you can, things are open to you here that are not open in other countries. Here, you can come from the worst kind of situation, have no kind of upbringing whatsoever. You can join the military, and if you work hard, if you get the job done, you'll get promoted, right? It still is a great land that we're living in. And we tend to look at all the bad things because the media forces us to see all that, right? But it's still pretty good here in America compared to other places. Joab got the job done, and Joab, verse 23, was over all the army of Israel. Benaiah, I love this guy. We'll talk about him next week. This guy jumps into a pit in the snow to kill a lion. Now think about it. Most guys would throw a few spears at the lion to kill it, and then they'd go down in the pit in the snow but he goes into the pit in the snow with the lion to kill the lion. I love this Benaiah guy. We'll talk about him next week. But this is just kind of giving us a little summary of the king's important officials. Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, was over the Cherethites and the Pelethites. Adoram was in charge of revenue. This is like the accountant or the administrator. Jehoshaphat, the son of Ahilud, was recorder. That's like a scribe that wrote everything down. Sheva was scribe. Zadok and Abiathar were the priest. And Ira the Jerite was a chief minister unto David. So, Ira is this guy that's just the right-hand guy to the king. And, everybody needs a good right-hand guy, don't they? Right? Chapter 21, now there was a famine in the days of David for 3 years, year after year. And David inquired of the Lord. You know what that means? David said, God, why are we having a famine? That's a question we could be asking of the Lord, right? We may not like the answers that we get for these things. But David inquired, Lord, why are we in this famine? 3 years of it. And the Lord answered, it is because of Saul and his bloodthirsty house, because he killed the Gibeonites. What? And we don't even have a record of this in Scripture. But that should send a chill up your spine. Why? Because even though we don't have a record of it in Scripture, God kept a record of it, didn't he? And God said, listen here now. Those Gibeonites, I know they were a crafty bunch. You remember back in Joshua? These were the people that acted like they came from some faraway place, They put on tattered old clothing and brought moldy bread and all of this. And they said, hey, will you make a treaty with us? We've heard about you. And, we just don't, we're way far away, but can you make a treaty? And they just looked with their eyes and said, well, you look like you came from a long way, but they did not consult the Lord. That's what it says in Joshua, right? And Joshua made a treaty with the Gibeonites. Then they found out that they're next door neighbors. And he said, well, listen, you tricked us. And we can't do anything to you because we made a peace treaty with you, right? But you guys are going to have to fetch us water and do some servant work or something like that. And they said, well, we're fine with that as long as we don't all get killed, right? So there was a treaty made with the Gibeonites. And at some point, King Saul, in the short time that he was king, he broke this treaty. And he started killing Gibeonites. And now there's 3 years of famine because Saul broke that treaty and killed the Gibeonites. Pastor Philip, are you saying that God punishes a nation for the sins of its leader? Well, it looks like it here, doesn't it? Right? Well, yeah, but that's Israel, right? We're not Israel. I find it convenient how Americans, we love to compare ourselves to Israel like we are blessed people. We started off with God, and in God, His name is on our money, and so nothing bad is going to happen to us because we're kind of like Israel. But then they don't want to be like Israel in a situation like when we read like this, right? Well, which is it, Does God smite a nation, that's old King James English, right, for the sins of the leadership? Well, let me put it to you this way. When we get into 1st and 2nd Kings and 1st and 2nd Chronicles, and those, sometimes people wonder, how come we have 2 sets of books about all these kings? Well, one set really focuses on the kings of Israel, and the other really focuses on the kings of Judah. It's a divided kingdom, and we'll get into all that. But here's what you see as you look at king after king after king after king. The leadership, say amen if you're listening. The leadership always reflects the people. When the people become wicked and perverse, God gives them a king like Manasseh, who is wicked and perverse. Whatever is the quality, good or bad, of the people, God gives a leader that reflects that. Now we ought to give pause to that, right? Selah, that's that word in Hebrew, right? Pause, stop, think this through in the book of Psalms. See, Christians, we can be the first to criticize and put down the leader that is a reflection of all of us. What? Well, I'm not. Yeah, you are. We all are. Listen, we look so un-Christ-like to the persecuted church in China and India. They don't even think any of us are saved. Do you know that? That's an unsettling thing. Now listen, God raises up people and pastors for the places, and they have such a hard, life, and so God's raised up these old Ezekiel hard pastors for them over there in China and all this. And I get that and everything. But they look at us and they think, well, your spending habits, your TV habits, movie habits. So we quite often we look just like the lost people all around us. Isn't that right? And you know me. I'm a grace guy. I would never seek to police, your TV habits and your language. I'm not about. But listen, we're supposed to be light in the darkness. Isn't that right? We're supposed to look and talk and sound and everything a little differently than everyone else. And when we have wicked leaders, all that reveals is that we are a wicked people. And it would be easy for us to say, well, yeah, it's all those people out there, right, Pastor Philip? If the church was doing what the church was called to do, would America be in the mess that it's in right now? I mean, you've got 70-80% of the people in our nation claim to be Christian or spiritual. That's the new term, right? I believe in God, but I'm just not affiliated with anything in particular. I believe in this and a little bit of that, and God's like my homie, and we're going to be okay one day. And I'm like, how in the world did we get into the mess that we are in here? I'll tell you, it's because the church, you know what we've been doing? We've been highlighting our Bibles and arguing over typos in the bulletin and all kinds of silly nonsense. And we have not been an agent. We have not been, people that are in the world but not of the world. We have not been going forth with the Great Commission. This Sunday we'll be finishing up our Red Word series, Matthew chapter 28, where Jesus says, go and make disciples. And do you know that even the big mega churches, the churches that anyone's thinking about ministries, looking into certain churches, and I could rattle off a bunch of guys that wear skinny jeans and they have 10,000 people coming. Do you know less than 1% of the people in all these churches are new converts to Christ? It's not people coming to Christ. It's people leaving other churches to go to this church because this church has better programs and ministries and facilities and kids' quarters and whatever, right? It's just all sheep swapping flocks and all this kind of stuff. Our nation is in the mess that it's in because the church, we've been trying to vote politicians in that are going to force morality on godless heathens rather than sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ with people in love. If people don't come to Christ, what do you have at the end of the day? Well, I didn't mean to go into all that, but leaders are a reflection of the people, and in this instance, I think God looked at this situation. He said, listen, I'm going to hold the whole nation responsible for this. This is going to be tough on everybody. 3 years of famine. You think about how many families in Israel were struggling to scrape up enough food because they're living in famine conditions. Famine means there's a food shortage. You understand that, right? It doesn't simply mean it's dry outside and you can't water your lawn anymore, right? We're talking about a food shortage. You're talking about hundreds, if not thousands upon thousands of families, and the mother didn't have anything to feed the kids, and the kids are going to bed hungry at night. And all of this is happening. Why? Because King Saul killed some Gibeonites. Whew. Wow. Well, let's read on. So the king, verse 2, called the Gibeonites and spoke to them. Now the Gibeonites were not of the children of Israel, but of the remnant of the Amorites. The children of Israel had sworn protection to them, but Saul had sought to kill them in his zeal for the children of Israel and Judah. And therefore David said to the Gibeonites, what shall I do for you? And with what shall I make atonement, that you may bless the inheritance of the Lord? And the Gibeonites said to him, we will have no silver or gold from Saul or from his house. In other words, you can't buy us on this one. Nor shall you kill any man in Israel for us. So he said, well, whatever you say, I will do for you. Now, I love that he says that. Whatever you say, I will do for you. You know what that says to me about David? He's not going to try and talk himself out of it. He's not going to say, I'm wrong, but this is the reason. All of this rhetoric, right? He just takes responsibility for what the previous king did. That's so uncommon today, isn't it, right? In our land, we want to blame the previous guy for everything and dump it all on him. David says, whatever you say, I will do for you. Listen, the next time you get in a fight with somebody and they've got you dead to rights, I mean, you're wrong and you know you're wrong, right? Don't tell them you've had a bad day. You didn't get enough sleep last night. You've had all this pressure at work. You having pressure with your family. Don't give them a bunch of rhetoric and everything. Just take one step back and say, whatever you say, I will do for you. I'm not kidding. Somebody try that. See what happens. That might work out pretty good for some of us, right? Just take a step back, honey. Whatever you say, I will do for you. It's got to work out better than what you typically do, right? I mean, you typically make all these excuses for why you've been a jerk and why you said and did the wrong thing. You blame it on all kinds of stuff, and then whatever you say, I will do for you. Lance, remember that. You've got to say that later to Amanda. Then they answered the king, verse 5, as for the man who consumed us and plotted against us that we should be destroyed from remaining in any of the territories of Israel. It sounds like Saul was on an extermination kind of a run here, doesn't it? Let 7 men, why 7? 7's the number of perfection or completion. Let 7 men of his descendants be delivered to us, and we will hang them before the Lord in Gibeah of Saul, whom the Lord chose. And the king said, I will give. Notice the word them is in italics. That's not in the original language. He just said, I will give. If he were speaking today, he'd say, you got it. Okay, all right, all the center section, you're all dead. Famine's over, everybody. Center section is dead. Whew, these are tough times, aren't they? But the king spared Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, because of the Lord's oath that was between them, between David and Jonathan, the son of Saul. So the king took Armoni, because he was a fashion guy. No, it's actually Armoni. So the king took Armoni and Mephibosheth. You say, wait, is this the same one? No, Mephibosheth was a very common Hebrew name. Mephibosheth, the 2 sons of Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah, whom she bore to Saul, and the 5 sons of Michal, and most people think that's Merab, the daughter of Saul, but I don't know. And she brought up for Adriel, the son of Barzillai, the Mahalathite, and he delivered them into the hand of the Gibeonites, and they hanged them on the hill before the Lord. So they fell, all 7 together, and were put to death in the days of the harvest, in the first days, in the beginning of the barley harvest. So it's like, yay, the famine is over, the drought, it's going to rain. But can you imagine the shock when there was a knock on the door? Is this where Saul's relatives live? Oh no, what's going on here? Well, your grandfather, he went out killing a bunch of Gibeonites. And King David has agreed that 7 of Saul's descendants are going to be hanged today. And congratulations, you're one of them. What a horrible day for these guys, right? Now, see, I could just read past this as quickly as it takes to, 10 seconds to read these verses, and we're by it. But the reason I'm camping out here for a second is to say, you and me, we think we've got it bad sometimes, don't we? Right? I had to take Tammy's van and get brakes today, that I had to get tires. And I didn't get my study time because I had a friend from Tennessee came in. We had to go have lunch at the Shrimp Basket with him. That's right. Yeah, isn't that pathetic? It's just that, if you could listen to your complaints like I listen to mine sometimes. We have not yet had a day when somebody said, "Wait a minute, what's your last name?" We've made an arrangement for 7 people with the last name Jones, Johnson, all the J's in the room. If your last name ends in a J, right? Oh, me. That's when Angelica would go back to her maiden name, right? That's right. Change it back quick there. We don't have it nearly as badly as these folks had it. These guys get hung, and yay, it's barley harvest. Verse 10, now Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah, took sackcloth and spread it for herself on the rock from the beginning of harvest until the late rains poured on them from heaven. And she did not allow the birds of the air to rest on them by day, nor the beasts of the field by night. I mean, she's guarding the dead bodies here. And David was told what Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah, the concubine of Saul, had done. And then David went and took the bones of Saul and the bones of Jonathan, his son. Remember at the end of 1 Samuel, they had cut their heads off, the Philistines had, and hung them up on the gates. And their kinsmen went and got their bodies down, and they, had like a funeral pyre for them. We talked about cremation. Is it right or wrong to cremate? Well, that does in about 37 minutes what it takes 37 years to accomplish. So if you want to do that, you can. But they dug up the remains, the bones of Saul and Jonathan, and they took them, which they had stolen from the streets of Bethshan, where the Philistines had hung them up after the Philistines had struck down Saul in Gilboa. So he brought, verse 13, up the bones of Saul and the bones of Jonathan his son from there, and they gathered the bones of those who had been hanged. And they buried the bones of Saul and Jonathan his son in the country of Benjamin in Zelah, in the tomb of Kish his father. So they performed all that the king commanded, and after that God heeded the prayer for the land. Note that this is when it actually, this curse, I guess, of the famine and all was broken through here. After that, God heeded the prayer for the land. And when the Philistines were at war again with Israel, David and his servants with him went down and fought against the Philistines, and David grew faint. Then Ishbi-Benob, who was one of the sons of the giant, the weight of whose bronze spear was 300 shekels, who was bearing a new sword, thought he could kill David. I mean, David's an older guy now, right? And he doesn't have the stamina he used to have. But Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, came to his aid and struck the Philistine and killed him. Then the men of David swore to him, saying, "You shall go out no more with us to battle, lest you quench the lamp of Israel." Now it happened afterward that there was again a battle with the Philistines at Gob. Then Sibbecai the Hushathite killed Saph, who was one of the sons of the, what does your Bible say that next word is? Giant, right? I mean, do you believe in giants? See, we live in a day now where people don't even believe you've got to be careful of this. I'm about to use some big, $20 words here. Be careful of anti-supernatural hermeneutics. Anti-supernatural hermeneutics. You say, what is anti-supernatural hermeneutics? This is explaining away anything that is fantastic and supernatural in the Bible. Were there giants? The Bible says there were giants. In Genesis chapter 6 is the first occurrence of this. When the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were available, and they took them, the Hebrew there, they took them by force, and they had children with them. The offspring of these angels and women were these Nephilim. And Genesis 6 says they are men of renown, men of myth, like Atlas and Hercules and the Titans. And those were all, that's all of the myth that came out of these Nephilim, right? Half human, half angelic beings, right? And in fact, some of the old rabbis 2,000 years ago said that the evil spirits, in Matthew's gospel, all the evil spirits that he had to cast out of demons and all this and all, that they were disembodied. They were the disembodied spirits of these Nephilim because they're kind of caught between heaven and earth and all this, right? I don't know if you believe that, but it is interesting to me that when Jesus cast a demon out, he says it goes through waterless places seeking rest, right? The pigs, legion, what did they do? They marched right off a cliff into the ocean. Why? Because there they could find rest until they could inhabit another body. An evil spirit needs a host body. They don't have a body of their own. That's not the same thing as the word demon, which is a lesser devil, right? Or a fallen angel. So you got these giants. The flood, there's some people, you can check out Chuck Missler, he has a lot of stuff on this. But a lot of people say that when Noah was blameless in God's eyes, the idea there really in the Hebrew is that it was the one bloodline that wasn't tainted with all of this angelic human, cohabiting and all of this. And so he wiped out everybody but, Noah and his wife and Shem, Ham, and Japheth and started over. But Genesis 6 says you had giants then and you also had them afterward. When the children of Israel get into the land of Canaan, the land that God has earmarked for them, what do you find? The spies came back and they said, we were like grasshoppers in their sight. I mean, they're huge, right? Now, you can't find the skeletal remains of these giants today. Every time they pop up somewhere, people come in and, governments come and get them. And, they're on lockdown. There used to be these old freak shows and carnivals and things. You can look up old documents, and they'd have these bones, 9 feet, 13 feet, I think 125 feet tall, right? Huge, right? And we've talked about how, in the early American days, when you come to a body of water to water you get your horse to get a drink of water, and there's someone coming from the other side to get water, you'd hold up your hand and say, how? And I come in peace, right? And the reason they held up their hand was so you could count their fingers. I only got 5. I'm just like you. I'm human, right? Because if you came upon somebody that had 6 fingers, you knew you were dealing with one of these hybrids, half angelic, half human. And we'll talk more about this next week because Benaiah is going to kill one of these giants, and it's 6 fingers, 6 toes. You'll see it. But yeah, I didn't want to just skim right past this. I didn't want to skim right past it. It's just right in front of us here. So there was this battle, and the Sibbecai the Hushite killed Saph, who was one of the sons of a giant. Verse 19, again there was a war at Gob with the Philistines, where Elhanan, the son of Jair Oregim, the Bethlehemite, killed the brother of Goliath, the Gittite, the shaft of whose spear was like a weaver's beam. That's almost like a 4x4, if you just want to picture that. Yet again there was war at Gath, where there was a man of great stature who had, what does it say? 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, 24 in number. And he also was born to the giant. So when he defied Israel, Jonathan, the son of Shemiah, David's brother, killed him. And these 4 were born to the giant in Gath and fell by the hand of David and by the hand of his servants. And I don't think it says it here. I think it's in 1 Chronicles that says that these were actually Goliath's brothers. So when David went out as a boy to fight Goliath and he took 5 smooth stones from that creek bed, some people think he took 5 in case he missed with the first one. He'd have, backup stones to sling. I believe he was so confident that he was like, I've got a stone for you and your 4 big ugly brothers, pal. I'm not going to miss any shot. I've killed lions and bears, and I'm taking you down. Why? Because we're supposed to take on giants and succeed. No, that's not what it's about at all. He did this because it was for God's name and God's glory. This Philistine had insulted God and the armies of the living God. So listen, anytime you and I step up to speak out for God will bless that, right? So here, the rest of these guys get wiped out here. Now, chapter 22, and I promise you, I'm not going to comment at all. I just want to read these verses to you because this is a song that David wrote. It's one of his praise songs, very similar to Psalm 18. What's interesting about this psalm is Romans and Hebrews quotes from this psalm referring to Jesus, so it's messianic in nature as well. Then David spoke to the Lord the words of this song on the day when the Lord had delivered him from the hand of all his enemies and from the hand of Saul. And he said, "The Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer, the God of my strength in whom I will trust, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold and my refuge, my Savior. You save me from violence. I will call upon the Lord who is worthy to be praised. So shall I be saved from my enemies. When the waves of death surrounded me, the floods of ungodliness made me afraid. The sorrows of Sheol surrounded me. The snares of death confronted me. In my distress, I called upon the Lord and cried out to my God. And he heard my voice from his temple, and my cry entered his ears. Well, then the earth shook and trembled. The foundations of heaven quaked and were shaken because he was angry. Smoke went up from his nostrils and devouring fire from his mouth. Coals were kindled by it. He bowed the heavens also and came down with darkness under his feet. He rode upon a cherub and flew. And you say, what's a cherub? Well, I told you I wasn't going to comment on this, but a cherub has 6 wings. 2 set to cover their feet, 2 to cover their eyes, and 2 to fly with, right? So he rode upon a cherub and flew, and he was seen upon the wings of the wind. He made darkness canopies around him, dark waters and thick clouds of the skies. From the brightness before him, coals of fire were kindled. The Lord thundered from heaven, and the Most High uttered his voice. He sent out arrows and scattered them, lightning bolts, and he vanquished them. Then the channels of the sea were seen. The foundations of the world were uncovered at the rebuke of the Lord, at the blast of the breath of his nostrils. And he sent from above, he took me. He drew me out of many waters. He delivered me from my strong enemy, from those who hated me, for they were too strong for me. They confronted me in the day of my calamity, but the Lord was my support. He also brought me out into a broad place. He delivered me because he delighted in me. Do you know that the Lord delights in you? Listen, half the churches people attend today, they leave thinking every Sunday that God's angry with them. God delights in you. He delights in you. Well, what do you mean, Pastor Philip? Well, the thing that comes to mind is when our children were very little, Tammy would put them to bed. And I'd get up to say, well, where in the world is Tammy? They should be asleep by now. And I would go into the hallway and I can still see the silhouette of my wife standing in the doorway of our children's room, just taking joy in watching the kids sleep. I'd walk up behind her, what are you doing? I'm just watching them breathe up and down. You know what that is? That's delight. You have a God that adores you. He loves you so much. He loves watching you sleep. Now he just thinks, oh, that's precious. Look at him. Love him. Just adore. He delights in you. He delights in you. Wow. Verse 21, the Lord rewarded me according to my righteousness. According to the cleanness of my hands, he has recompensed me. It means he's rewarded or paid me my wages because of what I've done. Not what I intended to do, but what I did. For I've kept the ways of the Lord and have not wickedly departed from my God. For all his judgments were before me. And as for his statutes, I did not depart from them. I was also blameless before him, and I kept myself from my iniquity. Therefore the Lord has recompensed me according to my righteousness, according to my cleanness in his eyes. With the merciful you will show yourself merciful. Now doesn't Jesus say something like that? You got to be careful. If you're awful hard on people, one day he's going to be hard on you. With the merciful, you will show yourself merciful. With the blameless man, you will show yourself blameless. With the pure, you will show yourself pure. And with the devious, you will show yourself shrewd. You will save the humble people, but your eyes are on the haughty, that you may bring them down. For you are my lamp, O Lord. The Lord shall enlighten my darkness. For by you I can run against a troop. By my God I can leap over a wall. As for God, his way is perfect. The word of the Lord is proven. He is a shield to all who trust in him. For who is God except the Lord? And who is a rock except our God? God is my strength and power, and he makes my way perfect. He makes my feet like the feet of deer, and sets me on high places. He teaches my hands to make war, so that my arms can bend a bow of bronze. You also have given me the shield of your salvation. Your gentleness has made me great. You enlarged my path under me, so my feet did not slip. I have pursued my enemies and destroyed them. Neither did I turn back again till they were destroyed. And I have destroyed them and wounded them, so that they could not rise. They've fallen under my feet. For you have armed me with strength for the battle. You've subdued under me those who rose against me. You've also given me the necks of my enemies, so that I destroyed those who hated me. They looked, but there was none to save, even to the Lord, but he did not answer them. Then I beat them as fine as the dust of the earth. I trod them like dirt in the streets, and I spread them out. You have also delivered me from the strivings of my people. You've kept me as the head of the nations. A people I have not known shall serve me. The foreigners submit to me. As soon as they hear, they obey me. The foreigners fade away and come frightened from their hideouts. The Lord lives. Notice the exclamation point. Blessed be my rock. Let God be exalted, the rock of my salvation. It is God who avenges me. That is, if you let him. If you fight your own battles, he'll let you. It is God who avenges me and subdues the peoples under me. He delivers me from my enemies. And you also lift me up above those who rise against me. You've delivered me from the violent man. Therefore I will give thanks to you, O Lord, among the Gentiles, and sing praises to your name. He is the tower of salvation to his king, and shows mercy to his anointed, to David and his descendants forevermore. Let's pray. Lord, I pray for your people that you would remind them yet again that you delight in them. Lord, I pray that you would free them from thinking that you look at them like some earthly father would. Lord, you're not moody. You're not spiteful or petty or vain. You're not malicious. You're kind and you're loving with us. And Lord, I pray that you'd help us not to take ourselves too serious the rest of this week. Lord, help us to enjoy what you've put before us and to be light and salt in a bland, dark world. And Lord, I pray for your people. Bless them as much as they can handle being blessed between now and the next time we see each other. And give them really good rest tonight, I pray. In Jesus' name, amen. Next week we'll finish it up. We'll talk about some more giants next week. There's a book by Chuck Missler, Return of the Nephilim, if you're curious. But he also has YouTube videos and he teaches on the same subject, so you may want to research that.